Hey guys, what is up? I've got a bunch of really cool fights for you today. These are fights with Gabri, as you probably already guessed from the title. These were recorded on PC. Gabri, like me, is on both PC and PS4, so we decided to have some fights on PC. Gabri is about as top tier as they get. He is comfortable with a number of different setups and weapon configurations, and in that respect, he reminded me of Painted Phantoms a little bit. Lots of mix-ups. He loves his mix-ups, and he is got incredible reads. One of the things I'll be talking about, I think, is what works about these setups and what makes them so effective, and then maybe specifically about Gabri, what makes him effective, and then even more broadly, these really top players, like what do they all have in common? What is it that they do? And I've really noticed some things that have jumped out at me. They're all very evasive. They're all very difficult to hit, and as you'll notice, a lot of that is just their ability to reaction roll is top tier. But a lot of it comes too from simply really excellent spacing, and not just the ability to space out an attack, but the ability to predict an incoming attack and be prepared for it and space it such that no matter if you throw the attack or don't, they don't have to roll. And it's one of the things that makes them just really, really good and very scary. And then finally, their ability to get reads on you and understand what you're going to do. They start to download you very quickly. Like these first couple fights, I think Gabri didn't always know what to expect from me. But after he played me just a couple times, he got really, really good at predicting me. In some ways, it was really uncanny. He knew exactly what I was going to do. In some respects, it felt like before I ever did. And you'll just see a lot of examples of that today. You know, to say that I'm pretty lucky to have had an opportunity to fight all these great players would be quite the understatement. It's really been a lot of fun, a peculiar kind of fun, because getting your ass beat time and time again, it takes a certain sort of fortitude and attitude toward the game to have fun with that. But I have mostly been having fun with it, and it's helped me get so much better. Like I really cannot emphasize how much playing these guys has made me a better player. I had some fights with G9 the other day in a little fight club that J0 set up. I may show those off at some point. G9's scary in his own way, but it's in a kind of a different way. And I'm starting to appreciate maybe some of the differences in these players. And you'll notice there too, I'm not going to let these guys bully me maybe as much as I used to. If you recall, like some of my early fights against B-dubs, he'd get in my face with that curved sword and I'd just start running away. You could just hear me screaming. And now I see when they're doing that, and I'll just start poking them with the stock, like, no, you're not going to just bully me around like that. But Gabri bullies me plenty in this, and you'll see especially with some of his later builds. This build here, actually, this is like Mocha used to use this build all the time, offhand hand axe, and I can't think of the name of that. Shit, I'm always so embarrassed by my lack of knowledge of the actual names of weapons and names of things in this game. But the one that you get from like Archdragon Peak. I never really cared for that weapon personally, although as axes go, it's pretty good. It's got good range. I know Silly Dog uses a setup like this, and Gabri definitely got plenty of W's against me with this. I'm not showcasing all of our fights, unfortunately, just because there isn't time. The video would be way too long. So I tried to pick fights that I thought were pretty representative of how things went. I think I probably did my best, sadly enough, in the first few fights, which in of itself is a very revealing sort of thing and something that I really have to pay attention to. It says that I'm too predictable, that as these guys start to play me a few times, that I start to fall into too many patterns of behavior that they're able to pick up on. And of course, these guys they excel at those sorts of predictions. And it's something that I've really taken into my own gameplay. When I am fighting somebody in an invasion and I poke them twice with the S-Stock, I pay very careful attention to what they do. Do they attack? Do they parry? Do they automatically roll? Do they wait and try to reaction roll what's coming next? And then I lean on that for our next encounter. And I'm not doing a good job here with that. But the other challenge is that players like Gabri know that other good players do that, and they will purposely mix stuff like that up. So if I poke him twice with the S-Stock, he's not going to react the same way every time unless I show that I'm not willing to change my approach. If I don't change my approach, he's not going to change his. He's going to do what makes sense. And in fact, you're going to see a really great example of that coming up here in a moment. I get him with a curved sword R1, and then out of hit stun, I hit him with the kick flip. Now, if I'd been smart, I would have known that he would have paid attention to that and not done that again. And you're going to see here, it's going to happen again. And I go for the kick flip again, but this time he rolls. He knows it's coming. And if instead I'd waited just a beat and then thrown out an R1 to catch his roll, I probably would have caught it. And see there, I saw him running next to me. I felt like he was trying to pressure me into a roll that he could catch with the hand axe. But I wasn't going to let him do that. See, and there's that kick flip again. But that time, all it took was one time, man, and he was paying attention. And the way that he just consistently was spacing out my running attacks, just outspacing them, where on my screen it looked like for sure I was going to hit him. And then in my recovery frames, he's whiff punishing me with that hand axe. So we saw the looks there, Gabri with the hand axe and the axe, and now he's got the Greatsword out. And Gabri is very, very good with the Greatsword. And he does some interesting things with it too that make him even tougher. And of course, he brings all of his other skills, the spacing, but he also brings in this new thing, which I had never really seen anyone do before, which I thought was really interesting. First of all, he actually went for a lot of backstabs, and I did not know that he did that, probably because in like a tournament, most of the players are so good, they would never get caught by it. But he does this thing where he hits you with the Greatsword, and then he like turns his body around and swings again at you. And he was telling me about it because I noticed it because he was hitting me with it so often. And it may not look like it just if you're watching the video, but believe me, when he does it to you, it's really deceiving. Like, you don't think that he's actually going to swing, and the swing comes out so fast. And this fight here was actually kind of funny for another reason. I was actually kind of proud of myself. I thought, oh man, I'm actually kind of winning this fight. I'm actually really doing a good job. And I think it was here in just about a moment. And I do apologize for the notifications down here, guys. I'm trying to get rid of them, but I've got a problem on my computer where they just keep popping, and I have not figured out what to do about them yet. So I do apologize for that. So again, the fight, I felt like up until this point had been going pretty well. Things had been going my way. Sure, he'd hit me a few times, I thought, but overall, I've had the better of the fight so far, and I was pretty pumped because up until this point, he had definitely been pushing me around and bullying me quite a bit. And right about here, he stops the fight and he said, "Hey, I think I'm hitting you with an unupgraded weapon." Because he had been showing me something earlier, so he got out his Gale's unupgraded weapon, and sure enough, he tested it there, and I realized he's been beating my ass with an unupgraded weapon.
Humiliation.
So as you can imagine, my earlier excitement turned to a bit of despair as I realized, like, I probably have no chance of beating this dude with this kind of a setup. Like, to me, a Greatsword is already a really challenging weapon to use against somebody who's really good. And the fact that he's so much better than I am, not just in general, but with this setup specifically, and he's got more poise than I have, like, this is just not a matchup that I'm very likely to do well at. But, man, I gotta tell you, like, I think it was right about here where I did start to get a little bit frustrated because I literally could not hit him. Well, I guess that's not actually true. I did hit him from time to time. But, I mean, he was hitting me probably 15 times for every time I would hit him. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. Just so good. And one other thing, and I don't think we've seen it so far, but we'll see it coming up more later. He has this, like, supernatural ability to differentiate feints from actual attacks. And you can actually see it in G9's Greatsword video. You'll actually hear Gabri's voice talking at one point, and he explains partly how he does it. He talks about punishing people on reaction, and he's not referring to necessarily on reaction to the swing itself, but on reaction to something you're doing that's tipping your hand that shows him that you intend to attack, rather than a feint. And I know like that Dark Souls guy is somebody who's really good at that too, but Gabri is like next level with it, like terrifying inside your head. How the fuck are you doing that sort of way? And that got a little frustrating after a while. You'll see here too. Now he's doing something different, right? He's got Gales, but now what he's gonna do is he's occasionally gonna swap to the dagger and then beat my ass with the dagger to get me to panic roll and then run me down with the Greatsword and roll catch me. And this is kind of like a foreshadowing of something we'll see later, another of his builds that many of you probably already know, which is probably his most terrifying, and that has yet to come. But it's surprisingly effective. And you'll notice that he only hits you once with the dagger, and it has to do with the way that the hit stun works on dagger. There's like no hit stun on the second dagger hit, or even maybe after the first. I have to listen to Gabri actually explain it. But the thing is, if he doesn't want to just sit there and spam the dagger, like that's not the goal. The goal is to put you in hit stun, to freak you out, and then depending on what you do, because I wasn't counterattacking, I was just trying to get away. And so he's just going to keep running me down with the dagger. And then if I contest, then he's going to start swinging the Greatsword and we're going to trade, and I'm going to lose that trade pretty miserably. Right there, I feel like that was the first piece of like really good spacing that I had, where I was able to really get a good whiff punish on him. And these guys, they make so few mistakes like that you can capitalize on. And at the end of the day, I should be losing these fights because he's so much better than I am. But when you realize, I guess, how much better somebody is than you are, it can be hard to deal with. And actually, this brings up something that I want to address. And there's that read, that ability to see when you're going to attack. And man, I just don't know how he does it. So, a lot of people describe, quote unquote tryhards, the top players, as overly passive. And nothing could be further from the truth. And what the truth really is that they calibrate their aggression to the situation. Their aggression is appropriately tuned depending on the circumstances. So against somebody like me who's not nearly as good as these guys are, they're way more aggressive and in my face. Now, some of it too is related to the build that they're using and the build that I'm using. There's again that read, that ability to see when I'm going to attack. But you'll see he's going to use a build here in just a moment that he uses with extreme aggression, and that's part of the build itself. It's not Gabri being aggressive, it's the build demands aggression for the build to work properly. And for some builds, they demand less aggression. And of course, when you're playing against another top tier opponent, if Gabri were playing somebody like G9 or B-Dubs or whomever, he wouldn't be nearly as aggressive because he knows he'd get punished for it. And that was very lucky on my part to avoid getting backstabbed there. But people too often, I think they look at the tournaments and they see that they tend to be relatively passive, and that's just, again, the demands of the situation, not them being just generally passive. So I think that's just a really important point to remember. Okay, so now here comes the Brutalizer. This is like I think probably the most terrifying build I've ever faced, and in the hands of one of the most terrifying players I've ever faced. So this is, offhand Ultra Greatsword, main hand Ultra Greatsword and offhand dagger. And so while he's going to do, I got a really nice roll backstab there, but what he's going to do is he's just going to chase me down, get in my face, and basically dare me to hit him. Because if I don't contest, he's going to swing once with the dagger, and then see if he can roll catch me with the dagger, or roll catch me with the Ultra Greatsword like that. And the moment I start contesting, then he's just going to swing the Ultra Greatsword at me. And of course, so the skill with this build is in getting the reads. Like right there, I decide to finally contest, and like he somehow like knows it, and so he hit me with a running attack with the Ultra Greatsword. But like this build, man, like I've played like a Vapid has used it against me, and Vapid killed me, but I didn't feel the same intensity of pressure. And I think, of course, nothing against Vapid, who's a very skilled player, better than I am for sure, but I think he would be the first to say too that he's not the equal of a player like Gabri. And I watched Gabri chase B-dubs around with this build like a year ago when I had, I think, my very first fights against B-dubs. I didn't know who Gabri was at the time, but I saw him fighting B-dubs with this build, and I remember seeing the Ultra Greatsword and thinking like, dude, do you know who you're fighting? How are you going to play this guy with an Ultra Greatsword? And then I saw him win. And I thought, what the hell? How's this guy winning with an Ultra Greatsword? Ultra Greatswords are garbage. And I think, in a competitive situation, two-handed Ultra Greatswords are probably mostly garbage, though I have no doubt that if Gabri used an Ultra Greatsword two-handed against me, he'd beat me. But taking players of equal skill level, I think a two-handed Greatsword is pretty much a non-starter. I'd love to hear if anyone disagrees, but when you mix it up with like a Corvian or a Rapier or something like that, it completely changes the complexion of the weapon. Gabri and I were having a voice chat in Discord during these fights, and I was just laughing through these whole fights because it was so ridiculous. I mean, he's just... I felt like there was nothing I could do. Like, he was just brutalizing me over and over, and I just couldn't come up with an effective response. There was nothing I could do to get him to stop. He just ran me down with it. I think, as time progressed, I got a little bit more comfortable, and I realized that the way to manage this is the way that Gabri's managing me, which is outspacing. So you can't reaction roll the dagger. Like, reaction rolling the dagger is pretty much a non-starter. So your choice is you pretty much have to space it out. And you can see here I'm trying to stop like panic rolling, and even though it's getting me hit more, I think that's progress. Like, because it's slowing the game down and trying to figure out what you're doing wrong and troubleshoot. And so the first step was stop mashing roll like an idiot. But then it was also the realization like, okay, I gotta get away from this guy. Like, I can't let him get in my face with the Corvian like that, because as soon as he gets that close to you with the Corvian, like, it's over, because you can't reaction roll it. And if you start contesting, he's gonna start throwing out the Ultra Greatsword. But you can see here, it's just basically me panic rolling like an idiot. And then as soon as I start to try to pressure him, he contests with the rolling attack, which is really, really effective on that weapon. I believe that's a Stora's. I don't think it's the Svi, but I could be wrong. It could be the Svi. So I should also say thank you to Gabri for these fights. It was really kind of him to take his time and spend it with me. And, we were having these fights, but we were also on the Discord, and we were talking a lot about what was happening in the fights. He was giving me a lot of really helpful tips and pointers of how to counter the types of things that he was doing. Just a lot of really cool stuff that he was sharing with me. There were a lot of times where we would just sit there for like 10-15 minutes and we were just talking and not even fighting. And obviously I've edited all that out because it would be boring to watch. And then, like, one of the tips he shared with me the other day is really interesting, and it's, it's like one of those things like, yeah, duh, I should have totally been doing that, but I wasn't. And that's during G9's stream the other day, there was a fight club that J0 was running, and I fought a mage, Darklock, I think is his name. It's a name I recognize, but I don't think I've ever fought him before. And he was the homing soul mass mage, which if you've ever fought somebody who's good with that, I've heard people try and say that that's easy to fight against. It is not easy to fight against. It is extremely strong, very difficult to counter. And I actually did pretty well. We managed to fight it out down to probably like each of our last sliver of health, which is remarkable. And in fact, the only reason I was able to be as effective as I was because I saw G9's video on how to fight mages. I had no real idea how to deal with them previous to that. But Gabri was actually watching the fight in stream, and he told me, he said, count the number of homing soul masses they get per Ashen Estus, because he said it's usually 7 or 8 per Ashen Estus. Now, sometimes they'll throw up a new homing soul mass to protect their Ashen Estus, but if you at least know how many they get, you can be ready to pressure them, because you have to really only try to pressure them in between each Ashen Estus. And so those are the types of things that he's been sharing with me, and they're really useful. And actually, this goes to another point where I mentioned things that good players are good at. And I haven't talked about this before, but really good players know all the weapons. And I don't just mean that they know of them, they know the move set. I mean, they know them. They know all the little pieces of minutia, like If I hit you with a straight sword and you've got a curved sword and I swing again, is there any way for you to interrupt me? What about normally? What about with latency? And they know all the weird exceptions. And if you block an attack with a shield, who gets priority with which weapons? Like all that stuff, they all know it, and they know it in extreme detail. And one of the things that they also do really well is they leverage their successful attacks. And Gabri talked to me about this quite a bit. And he said, look, against a good player, you're not going to get many chances to actually hit them. So when you do hit them, you've got to make it count. You've got to keep attacking. You've got them on the back foot. You've got attack priority, meaning they're coming out of hit stun. They typically will not win if they try to attack you. So use that to your advantage. And the problem here is I actually have been doing that. But against a guy like Gabri, he's so much better than me. I get scared. I get intimidated. And so I don't do that as well. But I have been getting better at doing that. And it's really good advice. So for these last couple of clips here, I just wanted to showcase another build that Gabri was using. He was using halberd, like red hilted halberd and ultra greatsword, which is a really interesting combination. And you'll notice he does the same sort of like flip around thing with the halberd where he like faces away and then throws it out. And it just makes it harder to read the incoming attacks. But you know, I learned so much from fighting Gabri. I've learned so much from fighting so many different players. I hope you guys enjoy this series. Let me know what you think. Thanks again to Gabri for his time, and I'll just let this last clip play out. Thanks for stopping by.